My guest is Congressman Bruce Westerman from the great state of Arkansas. Congressman, how are you?
Good morning, Tim. I'm doing well and good to be with you.
We're in the home stretch of this thing here, and all the conversation, most of the conversation, seems to be about Trump and Harris, and for obvious reasons. Everyone wonders what's going to happen. But seemingly forgotten in this whole thing is the House of Representatives, which currently the Republicans control by about this many, and nobody's quite sure how that's going to turn out. You're focused on that, you're tuned in on that. What do you see unfolding in the next few days in that final push toward maintaining the House for the Republicans?
Well, like you said, Tim, it's razor thin. You can count our majority on one hand. I don't think any of the pundits are getting real brave and stepping out there making predictions. But I've been traveling across the country working with a lot of our candidates in critical seats, and I'm seeing a lot of enthusiasm about Republicans in the House. Last week I was up in New Hampshire with Russell Prescott. This is a race that's probably not on a lot of people's radar, but as we traveled and visited in diners and met with people on the sidewalk, unprompted, they were talking about how displeased they are with the Biden administration and Harris and her work there. And just in the last week, we've seen the polls really close up in New Hampshire. So I wouldn't be a bit surprised we don't flip that seat in New Hampshire. Then I went out to Alaska. I spent some time with Nick Begich, and that's a seat we should have never lost. It's a Republican seat. Trump is up by double digits in Alaska, and I think we're going to flip that seat back. But then you got issues like in Louisiana where we had a seat drawn out and redistricting. Same thing in Alabama, even though we've got a candidate down there that could possibly pull that off in the new Alabama seat. So it comes down to a handful of races across the country to decide who's going to control the majority in the House of Representatives.
Let's talk about why it matters too, because I think, to the average family from Alaska or from New Hampshire, they're taking their kid to Little League, they're not tuned in to the issues every single day. So why does it matter if there are four more Republican seats than there are Democrat seats?
Well, I can tell you the reason it matters is because the thing that everybody recognizes, and that's the increased cost in food, the increased cost in energy, and the increased cost everywhere. Inflation, high interest rates made it hard to buy a vehicle. It's made it almost impossible to buy a home for people who are middle income and also people who are on fixed income. This is extremely difficult for them, the inflation that we're seeing. So it's important to everybody all across the country. And if you look at when all the spending happened that caused inflation to increase, it was from 21 to 23 when Biden had the White House, the Senate, and the House. And if you notice, once Republicans flipped the majority in the House in the 2022 election, all of that crazy spending stopped. So we put the brakes on it, but now we need to go from a defensive posture to an offensive posture with the Senate and the White House as well.
Help me look behind the curtain a little bit because you mentioned winning in 22. And then in 23, as the Republicans launched, the launch was a little challenging. It was what, 13, 14 votes before there was a speaker chosen. And then within a few months, that speaker was kaput and there was a new speaker in. And the media, who does not particularly like the Republican Party, the mainstream media, made a big deal out of this. And I have two questions. One, how stable can we expect things to be if the Republicans maintain control? But two, do you hear that from any man or woman on the street that, oh, I don't think the Republicans are stable because of leadership challenges in choosing who would be Speaker? It seems to me the media focused on that, but I've never met a human being that did.
It's interesting you bring that up because I've traveled a lot during this campaign season. I haven't had a single person say anything about that. Now, I think everybody would like for Republicans to pick a horse and ride that horse and not be switching horses in midstream. And that was very difficult. It was actually 15 votes it took to get Speaker McCarthy. And then we've got Speaker Johnson now, who's out traveling across the country, working hard, trying to secure this majority and not just secure it, but grow it.
You mentioned being in New Hampshire, and it was interesting. I was in Maine, and Maine only has two congressional districts, and the eastern Maine is there's Democrats sitting there. However, all the advertising on the radio, on television, talked about what he had done with President Trump and what he had done opposing Joe Biden. And I thought that was an interesting strategy. He's a Democrat, running as a Democrat, running away from being a Democrat.
Yeah, and Jared Golden is a smart candidate, but we've got, I think, a better candidate up there in Austin Terrio, a former race car driver, and everything's looking positive for him. So I'm expecting Austin to flip that seat back to Republican. You know, we lost that when Maine implemented ranked choice voting,
Ranked choice
just like
voting.
Alaska did ranked choice voting, and we lost that seat up there. But we've been a lot more disciplined getting one good candidate in the race to have a head-to-head comparison. Trump's obviously leading in that part of Maine for sure, maybe all of Maine. So I think this is a good opportunity for Austin to take that seat back as well.
You know, the pundits, and including myself, the pundits break down state by state, and the common wisdom says there are seven swing states. There are seven states that are up for grabs. But I look at a place like New Hampshire. You mentioned your experience there. That hasn't gone Republican since I think 2000. But when I look at the numbers there and I look how they're trending right now toward the right, I think, I don't know, should I be surprised? You're out there on the road. Should I be surprised if New Hampshire goes Republican?
I won't be surprised, and I say that having been there talking to people. You know, had I not visited there and next Tuesday night I saw New Hampshire goes for Trump, I would have thought, wow, that's a big surprise. But after being there and talking to people and hearing the how disgruntled and disgusted people are with higher inflation, with the southern border, with all the things the Biden Harris administration has done that's making it harder on Americans, I won't be surprised if New Hampshire goes for Trump. And I again think we're going to flip that seat, and I think it's going to be extremely close there either way that it goes.
All right, let's do two things. Let's talk about the House first, and then I'm going to ask you about the presidential race before I let you go. What you think is going to happen? I know what you want to happen, obviously, but what do you think? Is it too close to call, or are you saying, no, I really feel good that the Republicans are going to come out of this?
When you're talking about the House, it's extremely close, but I do feel good the Republicans are going to come out of it because I see the way that things are trending. I see where the national polls are for Trump, and I see where there's a lot of early voting and a lot of Republicans early voting. So I see more excitement on the Republican side. So I'm cautiously optimistic, but I do believe we'll maintain the majority and possibly even grow it some in the election next week. As far as the White House goes, yeah, I think Trump's going to win, and it goes back to the national polls. Again, it all comes down to a few states, but even if you look in those states, everything seems to be trending towards Trump. Also, another thing, I'll go back to New Hampshire. The day I was there, Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders came to New Hampshire. You know, the Democrats have some internal polling that has them concerned about a place like New Hampshire if the president's going there that close to the election. And I
Right.
think you're seeing more desperation on the Democrat side, which tells me their internal polling is telling them they're in trouble.
I'm always fascinated by the chess match part of it when you're dispatching your high profile people or the candidate themselves, where they do and don't go sometimes tells you what they're seeing. And I thought, for example, in Georgia, she was finally back there, but Kamala Harris has spent very little time in the past few weeks in Georgia, and I thought maybe their polling tells them they don't stand a chance there. You know, all the national polling says it's razor thin, but I thought it was really odd that she wasn't spending more time there. That was the difference maker last go round for them.
And obviously, there's only so many days to the election. You got to prioritize where those candidates are going to be. So they're looking at polls, they're looking at turnout, and they got a lot of people crunching numbers trying to figure out where's the best place to be as we head into the election, which we're just a tiny bit over a week away from it right now.
Congressman Bruce Westerman, thank you, my friend. Always a pleasure.
You too, Tim. Have a great day.
Be good.